Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the first living room of 2018. Thank you all for coming tonight, everyone in the room and anyone who might be signing in online, as well as anybody who might come back and watch later. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We're very excited to have you all tonight to kick off this new year with this amazing panel of patients and this conversation around why it's important to know your cancer. And you guys hear us talk about this in these meetings all the time, and we're very grateful to these folks, some from close and some from far, which we're also very excited about, to come in and tell their stories. So thank you all for coming. So as I said earlier, we're very, very happy to have our guest moderator here tonight, Dr. Deborah Morosini. She is an expert in genomics, and I think it's really important. Like I said, we talk all the time about knowing your cancer, and that means knowing, even if you don't have a marker, what that might also look like. So most of you also know that Deborah is very, very passionate about lung cancer. Her sister, for those of you who may not know, was Dana Reeves, and Dana was diagnosed with lung cancer at a very, very young age. I'm going to let Deborah go on and give a little bit more about that story and how lung cancer entered your life and how you've chosen to make it your life's passion.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
So hi, everybody. I'm seeing so many people I haven't seen in a long time. And it's really great to be here with you. I will start with my sister, because this really all started with my sister, and that's how I met the Adarios. And Bonnie's disease-free day is my sister's birthday. So March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, is a shared day. And my sister was also EGFR positive. So she was diagnosed in 2005, and she was diagnosed at stage 4. She was asymptomatic. I was a physician already, and her husband, who's Christopher Reeve, the actor best known for Superman, had died 9 months before. So, despite people thinking, well, did she get lung cancer because she was really sad? I hope for this group that I've dispelled that myth. But it is something, there is a lot of, it was sort of my first intro into blame and stigma in all the ways it can come to you, right? Even in the loving way of like, we pretty much know why she got this, because she had such a hard time. And I would say, no, she didn't get it because of that. Something happened to her genome, right? And that's why she got lung cancer. Very healthy, non-smoker. I started to really understand through those questions and others, I hadn't thought of lung cancer as a stigmatized disease. And, we all have, I bet every person in this room has literally been asked, did you smoke? What about these other things? And it seemed so peculiar as a stigmatized disease at that time. My first time to Capitol Hill, I was sitting with a really great leader there, and she said, well, my brother died of lung cancer, but he deserved it. He was a smoker. So it was really, for me, I'm a physician, but I'm more of a humanist. I have a master's in social work, and so to me, this was just this compelling idea of that there was this disease that was the largest cancer killer, but it was also presenting a kind of crisis of compassion, I thought. And that was really what I became interested in more than anything, and did a lot of, as much as I could, towards activating communities around this. And I think what I've seen this group do, Bonnie and family and friends and all of you, become such an amazingly powerful force for good. And as we're on this topic, I think we can come out of here this evening with ideas of, we hear these different barriers, now how do we go after them? Because I'm definitely that motivated towards those things. So I'm not really a genomics expert, but I see my pal Krista in the back, whom some of you know, and there's probably someone else, but I can't see you. And Foundation Medicine was founded in 2013 and was this cool thing about that could help people discover cancer genomics. And I, physician, everything else, lung cancer, I was like, what's cancer genomics? Right? That's how many, 4 years ago? What's that? And I watched the cartoon about 25 times and finally felt like, okay, I kind of get it. So it is something that before these past 5 years, we really didn't have in our lexicon. And the Adario Foundation has been really strong in working from genomics, but this is a very rarefied atmosphere, right? And everyone here, you know, when we hear your stories, I'm still struck by the fact that you as a young lung cancer patient, you know, it took your doctor so long to say, unusual biology. What's driving it?
They
right.
actually said that I was a rare case.
Well,
No
and it is
kidding.
rare, right? I mean, it's rare for young people to get cancer. And so, you know, as physicians, mostly we think if it's rare, then there's probably a really good cause and a specific cause, right? I'm going to do a little bit about genomics. And again, hearing that from you. So for anyone, just as a quick overview, and this will not be long, why do we care about genomics? Because true fact, you can all walk home and make up a song about it. Cancer is a disease of the genome, right? So it's not, you don't just get it from being sad, and you know, maybe you are, but mostly not. And really it's because things happen to the DNA that you were born with. Now there's inherited cancers, right? And those are caused by your genetics, but cancer that's not inherited happens to your regular old genes, and something either environmental mostly will affect those genes and cause something to happen. Either they, you know, get a mutation or it breaks, two genes come together, and that causes cancer. So all cancers are caused by that. So given that, there have grown to be many drugs, Genentech, I'll have to throw you a Genentech, amongst companies, and where I am, Loxo, have developed targeted therapies to attack those very defects in the genome. So that's why you want to know your genomics. And all of you are long-term patients, which is amazing. What did you understand, if anything, about genomic testing? And why don't we just kind of take everyone. Did you ever heard of it, and how do you understand it now? How do you tell your friends about it? Because if anything, I mean, you can save thousands of lives, just the people in this room, by telling people this stuff, right? And giving them a hand on it.
You know, when I was diagnosed in 2009, I didn't know anything about genomic testing, because I was never even offered sequential sequencing. So in 2009, I had adenocarcinoma, but I was never offered even to be tested for EGFR, alpha, ROS1. It wasn't until I had progression, and I learned about it during the years, over the years that I was on a targeted therapy, but I went back to my provider, healthcare provider, and asked if I could get my tissue tested, and there wasn't enough tissue left to test it. So I knew it was something that was important, but it wasn't until November of 2015, because I was stable for all those years on a targeted therapy, Tarceva, that I knew that when I had progression, that was the first thing I needed to do, was get testing. And I think that's when we met. I reached out to Bonnie, and Bonnie referred me to you. And I had my first Foundation 1
So
report.
that was the first time you had comprehensive
That's the first
testing.
time.
Okay.
And then what I had discovered was that even though I had been stable on Tarceva for over 6 years, I either didn't have the EGFR mutation or it had completely disappeared.
Oh, right.
Right. So either way, I'm grateful.
Yeah, so you had a
I
funny
got
case,
here.
right.
And
So,
you know,
go ahead, Dawn.
to your point, Dawn, 80% of all cancer patients, not just lung cancer patients, are seen in the community arena. And not always do all of the physicians in the community have the opportunity to be updated on the latest and greatest, new findings in lung cancer, because that's what we're concerned about here. So in my mind, it's important, most important, for you to be as smart or smarter and more educated than the physician, so you can go into your doctor and ask all of these questions about everything you're hearing tonight. It's like, well, what about this, and what about that, and what about that, and why can't I have this, and it's time for me to have another genomic test, or does that make sense?
And I think that goes back, Deborah, to what you were saying about sort of standardized testing and what's gold standard? What's the best thing you can do right now in order to filter out and or weed out what's might be irrelevant versus what's relevant?
Right. Well, I mean, I think, yeah. And it's getting it's understanding so that you can understand what it's asking for a test that's ideally a comprehensive test, which would mean they're going to look at hundreds and hundreds of genes in a way that can tell you what's happening in your tumor. And then those things may or may not be targetable. You know, you may have genomics where you're like, this is great, I hit a gold mine, or you don't, but then you know, right? Then you can drop lots of worry, or you can say, oh wow, I have this alteration, and you're going to focus on that. And do you want to say a little bit about what you guys have done with the Ross Wonders? Because
Sure.
I think that's helpful because it's genomically based.
Yeah. So I would say to you, at the top level, if you identify that you're EGFR or ALK or ROS1, go and find the social media presence for that. Within that, no patient is identical to another. You know, why am I on Xalkori for over 3 years and some other ROS1ers get less than a year, and then some ROS1ers are ahead of me 5 years plus? You know, there's micro differences that make a big difference in how we respond to medication and what treatments we're going to respond to. But at least I've narrowed my focus. I focus only on ROS1 developments, and I know nothing about what's going on in the EGFR world at all, because I have to filter out and focus what's going to be relevant for me. And not everything in the ROS1 space is going to be relevant to me today, but I keep that's a narrow enough window that I can keep tabs on that. And what Deborah had brought up is several years ago, I and a few other ROS1 patients got together and started the ROS1 Facebook group. So if there are any ROS1 positive patients online, or you have any friends out there, please send them to us. We have over 200 patients from around the world on our Facebook group. We have a website, and we're starting to do research, real research on our biospecimens to develop new treatments. So we're not just sharing information, which is incredibly valuable, but we're actually driving research and hopefully extending our lives.
And to Lisa's point, you kind of always need to be a step in front of where you are. You're EGFR, you know where you are now. You always need to be kind of looking at what is the next line option for me. And I think that's far enough to go, because sometimes too much information can be really, confusing and get you off track. But to Lisa's point, study your marker and what's happening out there. But also carry with you in your back pocket that we have actually seen patients that start with a particular marker, and upon progression somewhere along the way, they might have started with EGFR and progressed along the way, and now they're ALK. Another opportunity. Is that going to be you? Maybe, maybe not. But information is powerful. And, staying informed and staying abreast of what's happening to you personally is a really good thing.
Yeah, and I think it's insanely important especially when you're doing it in a community-type environment where you might not have the benefit of being with a lung specialist at an academic center who's, neck deep in this day in and day out. Patients will say all the time, well, why do I have to be the one to bring it back to my physician? But things are happening so fast and furiously, and now it's not just lung cancer, it's all these subtypes, and then it's resistance to those subtypes, and it's a lot. So imagine, and it's not just lung cancer they're treating whatever walks in the door, right? So it's so important to know as much as you can and then have those conversations with your doctor.
And that's actually why we're here.
Yeah.
We're here to keep that education going and keep all of those opportunities on the table.
So don't get me wrong, I'm not against knowing. I'm actually all for knowing.
Yeah.
And it's very important to do that. Yeah. And I mean, myself included, I have friends that I've known since I have my cancer. I mean, when they first found out the cancer, they don't even know what the questions to ask the doctors. I mean, they feel so helpless because they don't know what the questions to ask.
Right.
And I think knowing is important, and knowing can help direct people to certain directions. I mean, the only thing that I am scared of is by saying it in certain authoritative way, I gave the wrong impression for people. Okay, this is the way that you get a cure, or this is the way that you get hope, because sometimes there may not be hope. So that's the part I'm very concerned about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I get all this information, I know all these things, I tell people, okay, but they may just listen based on what they think I know, okay, yeah, and they're not going to find out more, and I may be pointing them to the wrong direction.
And not every EGFR mutant patient is going to respond the same way you do or other people do. It's a baseline, it's a place to start, but it's really not good to compare yourself always to other people, because then your expectations, go way up here, and everybody responds differently to different therapies.
Yeah. I think that's a really genuine point, though, is that we all worry about promising false hope or providing false expectations for people. And I probably talk to maybe 50 patients a week from with all different kinds of cancers. And the principle I use in guiding that is one of the hardest things, I think, for people to manage is regret, that they didn't know something, or that you didn't know what to do for your loved one. And at least if we have the information and we know, then we're not suffering through that regret, no matter what happens. There is a great peace in knowing I did everything I could, not going crazy looking for a million things, but through just cancer genomics alone, you can really buy a lot of peace. And I think, I get patients all the time who think, should I look for this or look for this? It's like, you may find nothing in those genomics. You might find just a bunch of stuff that's never going to help you, but then right? Then you're with that piece and that reality. So, I think that's what I use, if it's helpful for you, as my guiding principle, is to help people manage regret.
I want to share with you, I don't know if I have a marker. I was diagnosed in 2003, and Tarceva was in a clinical trial at that time. So I've never had genomic profiling, but I did have a tumor that was very invasive on my heart. And I found myself, I met with several different physicians, and they were all telling me what I didn't want to hear. And what they were telling me was there was nothing they could do for me. And nothing they could do for me just was not what I was looking for. So I kept searching, and I ended up finding an amazing surgeon and multidisciplinary team up at UCSF. And the surgeon asked me, he said, Bonnie, what do you want from me? And I said, I don't want to die because I did nothing.
Okay.
If I'm going to die, I want to know that I did everything I could possibly do. And he said, okay, I can work with that. Let me give you something that, may or may not work, but let me give you an option. And he did, I accepted, and I think that's all we can ask, that we've done all we can possibly do.
So, that's such incredibly helpful.
I know when I was told, go home and we'll watch and wait, to me that said go home and die, because I go to my physicians because they're experts in their field. But as a patient, I've always, always, always demanded every test result. I've charted it all so that when I would go into a new specialist, I could just plunk it down and say, here's all the stuff I've been through right now. You can see it, it's there. And it's helped me make decisions. But I see my care providers, all of them, as part of my team. And if there's one member of the team that's saying, there's not much I can do for you, there's nothing I can do for you, it means you don't want to be on my team anymore. Because until I stop fighting, you need to be on my team. And if you're not there, then I need to change team players. And you have to look for your own truth. And I think being an advocate for yourself, if I hadn't advocated for myself, if I hadn't gone and looked like Bonnie, I wouldn't be here today. I would have been dead at 32, and I wouldn't be here.
So true. And so were you, did any of you have that same question from your physician? What do you want from me?
No.
Never.
I mean, really, shouldn't that be the first question that your doctor asks?
What are your
you?
goals? Yeah.
What do you want? Yeah, what are your goals?
What do you want from this?
If we look at, Lucy and Paul's book, that was what gives your life meaning? What do you want to do in your last year? What do you want? Right? And we don't, we say, you need to go home, do this, you go there, you over here, right? And even just that one pause that David had with you, what do you want me? What do you want
I
from
said,
me?
I want you to hit it out the park for me, or at least try.
Yeah, and I think this is something that we hear about all the time,
that
right? The
question.
shared decision-making, the patient-physician relationship. I mean, they've done studies, they write all these beautiful white papers that make it look like it's happening everywhere, and the truth is it's not. But it's another way that you all, patients and caregivers alike, can raise your voice and say, I noticed you haven't asked me, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you, here are my goals of care, and if you can't bring this to me, to Anne Marie's point, I'm going to go ahead and try to find somebody who can.
And even, just as I'm thinking, I would probably have trouble negotiating that conversation, and I'm...
As a physician.
Oh, no, as a person, and I'm super forceful.
Yeah.
And I think, okay, how would I really do that? And maybe it is, maybe we try to find a language where you would say, before we start, I would really like, within this conversation, for you to ask me what I want.
So Anne Marie had said something earlier that I want to touch on about, you said that you were tested twice, and both times your test came back negative, and it wasn't until the trial that they found it. Deborah, could you explain a little bit how that might happen?
So I was going to ask you, do you know if it is an EML4 ALK fusion, or is it another kind of ALK fusion?
I think it's just ALK.
Regular old. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's really not so great. I mean, it's great you have it, but I'm saying, so typically, if you hear about missing an ALK, so in lung cancer, you're going to have kind of the major ones that, there are these guidelines called NCCN guidelines, which are kind of standard of practice across the leading cancer hospitals. And those are kind of aligned with reimbursement for practice, right? So many hospitals could argue, well, we test for the ones that are in guidelines, that where there's a lot of evidence, right? So EGFR, ALK, ROS, and are those, you have to test for them pretty much to be at least standard of care. Sometimes if you hear about people missing an ALK fusion, it's because they're testing for ALK with a different kind of a test. It's called FISH, and with FISH, you have to know the other partner. You're reading these illuminated dots on a slide. I always said if I were the pathologist, I would never have been able to diagnose it because I'm not good at it. So some pathologists are not great at finding these FISH results. There's a high error rate. But they're mostly looking for EML4 and ALK. You can also have another partner to ALK and have an ALK fusion, and that would never be detected by a FISH reading, and that's the standard way. If they're doing just one test at a time, that you're looking for ALK. Actually, now there's an IHC, right? That's replaced the Vice's FISH. So again, it would be interesting to kind of look over what they gave you, and I could give a more definitive answer. But I found it pretty surprising when you got to I didn't have anything, and then you had ALK. I thought, okay, young lung cancer patient. Right. Bing, 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 she has an ALK fusion.
When I first met my oncologist, he was like, okay, no problem, because I'm sure you have EGFR. I mean, we know we can target it. You just look like you have EGFR. I'm sure it's EGFR.
Yeah, you do kind of look that now.
Yeah. So then I go back, a week later, and he's like, well, yeah, you don't have
And
it.
there's this roller coaster.
It's a
I heard with
roller
you,
coaster,
you hear, am I going to have EGFR? No.
Right.
Am I going to have ALK? No.
Yeah.
And you think about what are the stress hormones we're talking about in those moments, right? I mean, when you're in a garden and you are a garden and you're going through this of like no and yes, it's unnecessary. It's like orchestrated drama, right? It is. I mean, what do you have? You have to find out. Do a test, figure it out, and one. Right? Not just this. This is so unkind to patients.
Yeah.
You could be EGFR. Oh, sorry, you're not. Yeah. Maybe you're out. No, you're not. And that's wrong. I mean,
Yeah, it is. But the explanation I was given later on how it got missed was that if you have a tumor, like not every part of it has.
they're really hard to read.
So Yeah, so they could test one part of the tumor and that doesn't show anything, but another part of the tumor could.
No, there is, and the official name is heterogeneity. So heterogeneity is a real thing. But again, that's when it's uncommon to miss something that's as strong a driver that is going to be present in most tumor cells. So it's, again, the more we know, the more we can, maybe we start to do case studies or something. I mean, we're doing this in industry where we're really trying to educate by way of, but by way of just people learning when to drill deeper. Like at that moment, you're not thinking, well, what kind of methodology did you use?
Yeah.
But again, those are the questions that can end up saving your life.